And when you show up early and on time, it really helps. First off, I just appreciate it, right? And second, though, it helps the whole training and the community that we're building because LinkedIn pushes it out and says, hey, there's a whole bunch of people in training. You should come over and join them. Going to get going on how to get into agencies. 3 easy steps I want to teach you about getting into federal agencies. And if you don't know this, every time I teach a topic, I keep trying to come back and look at it from fresh eyes. I work with a lot of customers, and so I try to take the experiences that I'm seeing them go through and improve my tips every single time. So I'm not regurgitating slides I've done before. And so today we're going to dive into you being able to get into these agencies. I really want you to believe and to know that you absolutely can get into any agency you want. One thing to keep in mind is these agencies and the buyers, they want to meet you. The government wants to meet you. There's some process steps you want to take to come in and have them take your call, but they want to meet you. And so when you're doing approach, if you're not getting in the door, then you just need to look at your process and go, how can I improve that? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. The reason it's important to want to get into any federal agency is because people buy from those they know, like, and trust. And when I know you and I like you and I trust you, we have a relationship, right? It's this business relationship begins with our ability to know who you are and to begin to trust you and the things you say. And that's why you want to get into the door, right? You kind of know this instinctively. And then also when you are in the door, when you get in the agency and you start building these relationships, you start hearing about opportunities. It's one thing to look at a long-range acquisition forecast or SAM or whatever, but you're only seeing part of the story. If you get into an agency and you're having conversations, you'll hear about opportunities much earlier in the process. And the last thing I really just want to start with here is just to remind you that we all suck at something until we get good at it, right? And I don't mean that in any kind of bad way, but I tell my kids this when I'm is teaching them to ride a bike or whatever it is. It's like we all are no good at something until we get good at it. And the way you get good at something is learning what is the process, what are the steps in that skill, and then practicing it over and over again. So on a bike, you keep falling, and then eventually you got balance, and eventually you're standing on the handlebars while the bike's going, right? I mean, that's the mastery of a skill that you're trying to do. And I want you to give yourself a break. Have the patience to allow yourself to learn this skill if you don't have it, right? I have 30 years of experience knocking on doors and getting in. So I'm very comfortable and very experienced at getting in the door. I don't have as much experience doing pricing, right? So, but I can learn that from a pricing expert. So there's these skills that if you practice them, you will sit there and become really good at it. And then going back to my first bullet, you absolutely will get into any agency you want. Today's training, I'm going to cover down on 3 steps, right? I'm going to cover down on step number 1, research the agency you're trying to get into, and we'll describe that. Step 2 is targeting these right people, making sure that the doors you're knocking on are the ones that are most likely to open for you. And I'll describe that to a degree. And then step 3 is I want to talk to you about the how more here is the how to do outreach to agencies, right? The process that I teach, some of the tips I can show you on just making sure you increase your success factor in there. I know that my LinkedIn is not sharing my screen. Can somebody just give me a heads up in the chat that you can even see my screen? Before I get too much farther, I'm sharing my slides. So can somebody see my slides? I'm going to wait for that first person to get in there. Actually, even the next slide, you don't necessarily need to see it yet because I can just talk to it. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, then we're able to have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you. Okay, so let's dive into the training with step 1. Step 1 for increasing your chances to get into a federal agency is research. You want to know an agency better than they know themselves. And what I mean by this is imagine if you're trying to get into the Navy. The Navy has 10 buying commands, a whole bunch of system commands, they also call them, right? But they have all these major commands, 10 major commands, and somebody might work for one of those commands. An example is NAVC. NAVC has a whole bunch of naval surface and undersea warfare centers. I think there's 10 of those. Well, so you got Navy, you got NAVC, you got the surface warfare centers. And down here in Crane, there's somebody who's very phenomenal at their job. Let's just say the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. But that person knows a lot about Crane. They know a pretty good amount about the warfare centers and what they're doing. But if they start going into NAVC, they're not as knowledgeable about everything in NAVC. But once you start going into the Navy and you've got NAVWAR, NAVFAC, NAVSUP, and these other major commands, they know less about it. But we on the outside who are looking in, we want to do business with the entire Navy. We want to understand them. And so when we do research, we're able to know those agencies better than themselves, and we're able to demonstrate that we care, right? No one cares what you know until they know that you care. And the way you can demonstrate you care is to speak knowledgeably about their agency. A couple of tips here on how you can research, what you're looking for. And I'm telling you exactly how I do it right now, right? I'm working with customers at different points, and this is what I do with them when I'm going in and I'm trying to, what I call owning an agency. I'm going in, I want to find the opportunities and I want to pursue it. First thing I do is I build myself an organizational structure, an organizational chart. No agency has a good enough one for me, but more importantly, I use a tool called MindMeister. And in MindMeister, I begin to build out the organizational structure. I'm going to use the Navy for today. I build out the organizational structure and I begin to put their major commands at the top, right? These 10 major commands. And then under them, I begin to understand, like with NAVC, we've got the warfare centers, and under the warfare centers, they've got divisions, and under the divisions, they've got branches, right? There's a lot there. And I build out my own organizational structure that has 100, 200 entries in there. I'm understanding the offices. I understand where data is being done, where cyber is being done, where where they're doing shipbuilding or welding. I understand these, and I can decide which offices I want to go in and which ones probably is not a good path for me to go down because they're not going to buy what I sell. But building that out, if you want to make or win contracts that are worth $1 million or $5 million or $100 million a year at the Navy, why wouldn't you invest the time to get to know them and then build your own org chart? It doesn't take long, and it's iterative, right? So you take your first stab at it and you iterate it as you learn more. So the first thing is organizational structure. As I do that, I try to put people's names in there when I can find them. I'll often go down this path and I'll find an organizational structure in the Navy. There's something called PEO Digital, and I can go in and to LinkedIn and I can see there's 40 or 60 people or something that work for PEO Digital. I can now begin to line them up in my organizational structure in whatever tools you use, right? But now I know who I might want to follow up with, and I'll talk more about that in a second. The next thing you want to go after are strategic plans. So strategic plans are where the government is talking about what they want to do in the way forward. So in this particular case, we're talking about strategic plans for generally 2022 to 2026. They tend to run 4-year plans. And in there, you can learn about the agency's strategic goals. You can learn about their objectives and sometimes even their action plan. So goals are big picture. Objectives are kind of how they're going to measure their activity towards that. And then they have activity. And sometimes in these strategic plans, they say which office is responsible for this particular objective, who's leading the charge. We're all going to support it, but somebody's leading the charge. Well, if I see a particular objective that I can support, and I'm able to align it to which office is tracking on that, now when I go in to talk, when I get into the agency, I'm speaking specifically to areas they really do care about, right? These strategic plans, the reason I like them is because they help us understand where we fit. If you look at a strategic plan, they're telling you what is important to us, where we're going in the future. When you know that, then you can understand where your company can support them in those goals and objectives in their mission that they're trying to accomplish. Okay, so the next one is annual reports. If you have a strategic plan, it's forward-looking. When you look at an annual report, it's backwards-looking. So right now, the current annual report is for fiscal year 2022. We just wrapped up FY 2023. Most of the annual reports will be coming out somewhere in the January to March timeframe. But you can look at these annual reports, and they're awesome because in there, they will tell you about what they're most proud of, right? That's really good. If you want to build a relationship, go in there and talk about, hey, I saw this. That must have been pretty exciting. Oh, it was. We accomplished this. It was a huge lift, but we got it done, right? But you'll also see where they tried to accomplish certain stuff and they weren't able to get it. Sometimes it's a really obvious reason, like in 2020, we tried to accomplish this, but because of COVID, we weren't able to do it at push. Other reasons, we tried to accomplish something, but it was just difficult. When you look into annual reports, again, you're able to see where your company fits, how you might be able to help them. And sometimes in the annual reports, you begin to see teams, we're really proud of this accomplishment and this team who did it. Well, when I know who the team is, I can go back up to the organizational structure I've been building and either put them in if they're not there, or highlight them in green saying, hey, I want to go talk to them. But I'm beginning to learn about it, right? These things that I'm talking about for research, strategic plan, annual report, and organizational structure, they all begin to fit in to help you have a much broader awareness of an agency and how you can fit into their mission and their needs. So management challenges, this is a great one. And this comes from a couple different places. The management challenge is a document that comes out of a report that comes out of the OIG, Office of Inspector General. Most agencies have this, and they have the management challenge. Sometimes these management challenges are defined by the Government Accountability Office, their GAO. They do reports and they look into agencies and they sit there and say what's wrong with them, basically. And they make suggestions for the agencies on how they can fix it. And the agencies respond back with whatever their opinion is. Oh, we're doing a great job. Or, yes, we recognize it's a problem. We're going to be trying these things. On the OIG side, it's the same thing. There's a list of challenges that the Office of Inspector General sees for their own agency that management is facing, and management puts a section at the end that says, hey, this is our response to what you're saying, and this is our reaction, our plan to deal with these challenges that you've identified. The reason I love these is because management challenges are the very problems us salespeople are trying to uncover. Sales is about a solution to a problem. We don't want to walk around with a solution looking for a problem. If you can define or identify a problem through any of these documents, especially the management challenges, then you have now the ability to tie your solution, which is an answer to a problem they have. You don't walk right in. There's a whole bunch of questioning and dialogue and discussion you want to have, but at least now you know the problems they have, and you know how seriously do they think that problem is. And sometimes, again, in these challenges, they'll go into that discussion. And the last one is the budget documentation, right? So if you understand the strategic goals, you understand some of their challenges, where are they putting their money, right? Where they're putting their money is where they have the priorities. And so you want to look in and learn about how an agency is spending money before you go in, right? A lot of times you'll hear people say, you want to know if they're buying what you sell. Of course they're buying what you sell. It just depends where and how much. But really, when you're deciding which agencies to go into, this whole idea of researching an agency, you should have already decided that there's room for you to grow significantly in that agency. And now you just need to understand which ones of their goals and challenges are aligning to that activity you're doing. So budget documentation, another great thing about it that I like is I can go in and sometimes see how big is a department, like how many people are in this, not a department, that's too big, but a division or a branch or an office. I can see these listed in there and see that they had 29 people. I saw a great one where there was 29 people one year, and a couple of years later, there was 22. I'm like, did you have 7 people less of work, or did they just take your money away? And that's a great way to get the discussion going within an agency. And when you're trying to break into an agency, understanding all these things will give you a lot more credibility as you move forward. So that was step 1. Let's talk about step 2, which is targeting the right people. By the way, again, do me a favor in the chat. If you haven't done this already, tell me which agency you're targeting. Just let me know the top agency, not a couple or something. I'm just really curious on the top one. That way, as I move forward, if I'm interacting with people and I know that you're in this agency or you're targeting this agency, I might be able to make referrals. And hopefully other people in today's training will track on that same thing. We have about close to 190 or 100 people in here right now live. And so it'd be good for them to know which agencies you're trying to get into. So when you think about targeting the right people and trying to get into an agency, the first thing I want to recommend is that you're really thinking about one agency, right? You pick one agency and you're very purposeful about the type of people you're trying to meet. I had a call with a customer this morning, and I was talking to them. They do digital transformation. I said, well, who cares about what you do, right? So first we're trying to define, what does digital transformation look like as an opportunity title that might be in SAM or something, right? Because it's not going to be digital transformation, it's all these other things. And then I said, who cares about this? Like, which role or title does somebody have within an agency that would care about it? And we were talking about it and landing on these different directors of IT, et cetera. Well, you want to do that same thing. When you're trying to reach out to people, you want to begin to understand who would most likely care about what you're saying. So you're knocking on more of the doors of people who care about whatever you want to talk about compared to random people, right? And that's what I mean by being purposeful in your targeting. When you pull together names, I want you to pull together a list of 100 or 200 names to do targeting, to get into an agency, but make sure it's really focused as much as you can. Another way to do this is if you go into FPDS and you find a bunch of contracts that were awarded at your target agency in your NAICS, and then those are the contract officers you try to reach out to. Don't just reach out to every contract officer in that agency, because a lot of them are managing your services. Number 2 is just making sure you're gathering enough names, emails, and phone numbers. So here, when we talk about targeting, I mean putting together a list literally of names, emails, and phone numbers, right? You can have title and agency and all that, but the value is having an email and a phone number, because you want to phone people first. My way of teaching you, right? You want to phone people, leave a voicemail generally, and then follow up with an email. So when you have a targeted list and you've built a list of names, emails, and phone numbers, you're going to have traction. And I said this a minute ago, you want that list to be 100 or 200. When you're trying to get into an agency, don't just have 5 people's names and that's what you're dealing with. Have 5,000 people's names, right? I mean, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but have a lot of names and give yourself much higher chance of success. All right, so there's 2 ways of building a targeted list that I wanted to talk about today. One is business development, the other is capture, right? So when I think about business development and I teach business development, I say it's got 3 purposes, right? To understand the agency better than anybody understands it themselves, but understand the agency, develop relationships, identify opportunities. That's what business development is. When the opportunities are identified, it goes into capture. Capture is about shaping opportunities. So let's talk about agency business development first. This is you trying to break into an agency that's brand new and you're really focused on it. You want to make sure you're building a target list that includes 3 key groups of people: government employees who are doing the job, acquisition people, small business professionals, program office, etc. And then you want large prime vendors that are in there. And I always look for the top 10 or 20 large primes that are succeeding in the agency I want to go after in the NAICS codes that I'm in, right? And the same thing with small businesses. In this case, I'm looking for the top 20 to 50 small businesses that are winning in the NAICS codes that I do serve or related, right? So you can expand on that. You want a lot more small businesses, because in small businesses, you really only have 1 or 2 people you could call. But in a large, I could build a list of 100 people in one large company alone. So, but when I'm thinking about trying to get in, I want to build a list that allows me to come from the different angles. When I think about an opportunity and I'm trying to build a target list to pursue capture on a particular opportunity, these are the people that I put into my pipeline. I have a field where I'm tracking the key points of contact for this opportunity, and I look for the program office people, right? I understand who the program office is, so who's in there? If I begin to identify who's in there, remember, if I look at the budget, I can see how big that office is. When I identify some of those people, I'm also identifying people who potentially are on the proposal selection board, the people who review a proposal at the end. But I want to be able to identify folks in the program office so I can get in there and shape it. I want to identify the acquisition personnel, the contract officer, the contract specialist, small business professionals. I always want to engage them. Even if you feel like sometimes they may not be helpful, it doesn't matter. Include them. And you're going to increase your visibility. They will watch and appreciate that you're doing the right thing. And out of the blue, you'll see somebody come and offer you something. A quick, complete sidebar here for 1 second. I got a customer who's been with us a few weeks, and you can do a lot of this stuff on your own, and he did as well. But I teach this all the time about visibility, is being in DSBS. And this customer was in DSBS. They had a great profile. And when I mean great, it was completely filled out. Long story short, they did this 4 weeks ago, and inside of a 4-week period, they were contacted by the IRS, right? So a big agency, and they were brought in to talk about a particular opportunity. I don't mean that if you're in DSBS, this is always going to happen, but I guarantee you, if you're not in DSBS completely, and somebody looks, they're going to miss you, right? All this customer did was make sure their keywords and their narratives and what they sell is in there. If your DSBS profile is not complete it. I have a massive amount of free training on how to rock that. And that's the #1 place market researchers look. All right, let me come back. So opportunity capture, when you're looking at this, you want to be putting together a list of the incumbents and the interested vendors. And so interested vendors, you can find that on GovWin if you use tools like that, but you can also find it from industry days. Often they put out a slide that says, hey, here's all the people who are interested or attended an industry day. Always be pushing for that kind of stuff. And then the other ones that I really like, when I'm doing capture on a particular opportunity, I'm obviously going after the incumbent, right? But I'm going to go after people who are winning in there, large or small. These winners who are on the same NAICS code, or they're winning on my NAICS code or related NAICS code, so 511, 512 for 541. When I go after that, these people are ones who are going to help me get in the agency. If I'm trying to get in, I want to have as many different doors to knock on in order to get in. And the last group of people I would recommend you track on are agency top contract vehicle holders. So an example is when I look at the Air Force, I might look at Oasis, or obviously if I'm looking at Navy, I'm looking at Seaport Next Gen, those type of things. Look into your target agency and go, what are the top 5 contract vehicles that are used for my NAICS code, right? That doesn't take a lot of time. In fact, you can just call a small business specialist or even a contracting officer and ask them that one quick question. You'll get the answer, plus you'll also get in the door so you can follow up later with all sorts of, hey, thanks for giving me the information. Okay, so that's targeting. Let's talk really quickly. I want to make sure I respect the time, and I end right at 12:30 here. Here's step 3 on how you can get in, right? Outreach following a proven process, and I teach a process. I just described DSBS. That's what I mean by being visible and attractive. LinkedIn profile, your website. These are places where people are going to go look and see, what do you sell? What do you say over here? And that's where they sometimes make decisions about, yeah, I'm not even going to answer your email, or I'm not going to respond, or I'm not going to take the meeting. I already mentioned be focused, one agency at a time. If you're trying to break into an agency, don't break into 2, break into 1, and you'll be able to put your attention in there. And all those people I said you want to gather, they're all in there and they can all help. But make sure you have realistic expectations around your outreach effort. If you're trying to break into an agency, don't think you're just going to do it immediately. Sometimes you get lucky and somebody responds right away and said, hey, let's connect. This bell curve here, I have a whole other training on it. But what it tells you here is that 2.5%, so 2 people out of 100, when you reach out on a phone call or an email, they're going to go, oh, hey, let's talk, right? And then 13.5%, they'll be kind of up for it, right? But the big thing to remember is over on the right-hand side, 50 out of 100 people, 1 out of every 2 people you call don't want to talk to you, and they won't talk to you. Some will even like be a little grumpy. But when you understand that, you'll begin to realize, well, am I calling 100 people? Am I calling 1,000 people, right? You don't need to call 1,000 people once you're in the door. But if you're not in the door, you should massively increase your effort so that you have the chance to get in the door. Have a purpose and an objective. So when you're reaching out to somebody, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to learn about a particular opportunity? Are you trying to introduce your company? Whatever it is, make it easy for them to understand. I like to knock on doors to try to schedule introduction meetings, but if I don't get traction on that, I might wait a few weeks and then come back and just ask a really simple question, just so I can see if I can pull them into answering the question. Make sure you use templates and voicemail scripts, email scripts. These things make what you do repeatable. This is the repeatable part of the process. I've done a lot of training on that. You can go watch me where I talk about cold call scripts, voicemail templates, and email templates that you can follow. But the last tip I have here is create interest and ask a question. So you might create interest talking about how artificial intelligence can help them with something, and you target it specifically, or you might ask a question as simple as, I was just asking really quickly, what's the #1 contract vehicle used for 541, 511 or something? Just some question that makes it easy for them to respond. I saw somebody write an email recently, it was really long, and I'm going to give them feedback saying, get rid of 99% of what you just wrote. People don't read, but when they read and it's easy to answer, they will, because they do really want to help. We just, when we have reasons not to help, we kind of bail. So here's what I want you to remember from today, right? Make sure you're researching an agency. It doesn't take you long, a couple of weeks at most, but research an agency to show you care and to begin to really understand that agency. And then target the right people, right? Begin to build that list the way I described early on. And when you do that, you'll be able to reach out enough times, that bell curve, right? With initial calls where you're reaching out to, let's say, 100 people, but then you're following back up with them. I did training early in the week where I said, here's a 30-day process. So go watch Monday's training where you learn how to follow up and how frequently you can follow up. One of the things I want you to do as it relates to networking and getting into agency doors is just consider coming to our networking event on October 17th. You can register at govconchamber.com. Just go to the site and you'll find out how to register there. For everybody, as we relate to getting in the agency door, remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.